Ask yourself a simple question and watch how quickly it falls apart. How fast does time pass? The only answer anyone can ever give is 1 second per second, but that is not a speed at all. It is like saying a road is 1 mile per mile long. Every real motion in the universe can be measured against time, but the supposed motion of time itself can be measured against nothing, because there is no second clock ticking outside our own. And when you follow that strange little fact all the way down, through the most tested theory in the history of science, you arrive somewhere that should not be possible. You find that the flow of time, the one thing you are most certain of, was never written into the laws of nature at all. So if time is not moving, then what exactly is happening to you right now? Get comfortable and settle in for this one. Subscribe if you have not already, and stay with me, because the path we're about to walk ends with your own tomorrow already standing there in the dark, finished, waiting. Let's get into it. Part 1. The river you have always trusted. Right now, as you listen to this, you're certain of something so completely that you have probably never once stopped to question it. You're certain that time is moving. There is a moment happening, this one, the one you are inside of as these words reach you, and it feels like a thin, bright edge sliding forward through your life. Behind that edge sits everything that has already happened, fixed and finished and out of reach. Ahead of it waits everything that has not happened yet, open and unmade and unknown. And you are riding that edge, the way a small boat rides the surface of a river, carried forward whether you want to be or not. We talk about time this way without even noticing. We say that time passes. We say it flows, that it runs out, that it slips through our fingers, that it marches on. We say we're running late, that we have time to kill, that the moment has come and gone. Every one of those phrases hides the same quiet assumption, the assumption that time is a kind of motion, a current that carries the present moment from the past toward the future at some steady, unstoppable pace. It is the most ordinary idea in the world. It is also, according to the physics we're going to walk through together tonight, almost certainly wrong. I want you to sit with how strange that sentence is before we go any further. I am not telling you that time is mysterious, or that scientists argue about the fine details of how clocks work. I am telling you something far stranger and far quieter than that. I am telling you that when physicists write down the laws that govern everything we know about the universe, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, the flowing river of time you feel so certain of does not appear anywhere in the equations. It is simply not there. The motion you are most sure of, the one thing you would have sworn was the bedrock under every other fact in your life, was never written down by the people who wrote down the laws of nature. And when you understand why, the floor that you have been standing on your whole life begins, very gently, to tilt. Let me give that river a name, because we're going to come back to it many times before the night is over. Picture time as a river that has carried you from the moment you were born to the moment you're in right now, and that will carry you onward to every moment still to come. You have always assumed that this river is moving. That is the whole point of a river. The water flows, the current pushes, and you, the little boat, are swept along. Hold on to that picture. By the end of this journey, I am going to ask you to look at that river again, and you're going to see something about it that you cannot unsee, something that changes whether the most frightening idea in physics is a prison or, strangely, a kind of mercy. For now, though, let us simply notice how total the feeling is. Close your eyes for a second, if you're somewhere you safely can, and try to find the present moment. Try to put your attention on the exact instant of now. Notice how it refuses to hold still. The moment you reach for it, it has already become the past, replaced by a new now that is already on its way to becoming the past as well. It feels like trying to grab flowing water. You cannot hold a handful of river. The present is always escaping into what has been, and the future is always arriving to take its place, and the whole thing never, ever stops, not for a heartbeat, not for the length of a single breath. This is the experience that every human being who has ever lived has shared. The pharaohs felt time passing. The first people to paint on cave walls felt it. Every person you have ever loved has felt that same current, that same impossible to hold edge of now sliding forward through their days. It is so universal that it seems less like a belief and more like the basic furniture of reality, the stage on which everything else happens. Of course, time flows. What else could it possibly do? Look at how completely the assumption is wired into us, far below the level of words. Your body runs on it. You have a cluster of cells in your brain, a tiny biological clock that keeps you roughly synchronized with the turning of the planet, releasing the chemistry of drowsiness and waking in a slow daily rhythm. Your sense of music depends on it, the way a melody only becomes a melody when notes arrive in order, one after another, building on what came before. Your grief depends on it, your hope depends on it, your patience and your dread all depend on the conviction that the present is being carried forward and that what has not happened yet is still out there, coming toward you. We do not believe that time flows the way we believe a fact. We believe it the way a fish believes in water, which is to say we do not notice we believe it at all, because we have never once been anywhere else. And that is exactly what makes this so hard to see clearly, and so unsettling when you finally do. You cannot step outside of the feeling to check it against reality, because the feeling is the medium you do all your checking inside of. And here is the quiet irony that should already be tugging at you. Even our most precise instruments, the clocks and the calendars and the timers, do not actually measure a flow. A clock does not measure time passing. A clock counts. It ticks off regular, repeating events, the swing of a pendulum, the vibration of a quartz crystal, the oscillation of an atom, and we read the accumulated count and call it the time. But counting up a stack of ticks is not the same as detecting a current. You could lay all those ticks out side by side, frozen, and the count would be exactly the same. Nowhere in the machinery of any clock ever built is there a part that senses motion through time, because there is nothing for such a part to sense. The clock counts. We supply the story of flow, and we supply it so automatically that we mistake our own storytelling for a measurement. And yet here is the first small crack, and I want to slip it in gently, because the whole rest of this journey grows out of it. If time flows, then it must flow at some speed. Rivers have a current you can measure, so how fast does time pass? The only answer anyone can ever give is that time passes at 1 second per second. But stop and listen to that answer, really listen to it, because it is not an answer at all. 1 second per second is not a speed. It is like saying a road is 1 mile per mile long, or that you are travelling at a rate of yourself per yourself. It tells you nothing. Every real motion in the universe can be measured against time. A car moves so many miles per hour, light moves so many kilometers per second, but the supposed motion of time itself cannot be measured against anything, because there is no second clock, no outside time, against which the flow of our time could be clocked. The flow of time may be the only motion in all of existence that cannot be assigned a speed. And a motion with no speed, a current with no rate, starts to look less like a real river and more like a story we tell ourselves about a river that is, in fact, perfectly still. That is where we are going tonight. We are going to follow that crack all the way down. We are going to see how a single insight from a young patent clerk in 1905 quietly removed the present moment from the universe. We are going to stand on a sidewalk and watch a few footsteps decide whether an alien fleet has launched 2.5 million light-years away. We are going to look at the universe the way the mathematician Hermann Minkowski taught us to see it, as a single frozen shape containing every moment that has ever been or will ever be. And we're going to arrive slowly and carefully at the idea that gives this whole subject its quiet terror. The idea that your future already exists, that the day of your death is already a real place, and that nothing you do has ever moved you 1 inch closer to it, because you were already there the whole time. Get comfortable. This is going to be a long, slow walk, and it ends somewhere you do not expect. Part 2. The word. Physics never wrote down. To understand why physicists do not believe time flows, you have to understand something about how the laws of physics are written, and it is simpler and stranger than you might think. A law of physics is, at its core, a rule for connecting one situation to another. Tell me where all the planets are right now and how fast they're moving, and Newton's law of gravity will tell me where they will be tomorrow or where they were 1,000 years ago. Tell me the state of an electromagnetic field, and Maxwell's equations will tell me how it ripples outward as a wave of light. These laws are extraordinarily powerful. They have put spacecraft into orbit around distant worlds and predicted the existence of particles before anyone ever saw them, and every single one of them shares a feature that almost nobody outside of physics ever notices. None of them contains a now. Think about what that means. When Newton writes down how the planets move, his equations describe the entire path of each planet, the whole curve it traces through space over all time, as one complete mathematical object. The equations do not say, and here is the special moment that is happening, and here is the part that has not happened yet. They treat every moment along the path exactly the same way. The year 1600 and the year 3000 are, as far as the equation is concerned, simply two different locations on the same curve, no more special or less real than each other. There is no marker in the math that lights up and says this is the present. The present moment, the thing your entire experience is built around, is something the equations are completely silent about. It gets stranger. Not only do the laws fail to pick out a present moment, they also do not care which direction time runs. This is called time symmetry, and it is one of the quietly shocking facts of physics. If you took a film of two billiard balls colliding and bouncing apart, and you played that film backward, the backward version would still obey every law of physics perfectly. Nothing in Newton's equations, nothing in the laws governing the particles would be violated. The same is true for the motion of the planets, for the behavior of light, for the interactions of almost every fundamental particle we know. Run the universe forward, run it backward, and the deepest laws cannot tell the difference. They work just as happily in reverse. There is no arrow built into them, no sense in which the future is the direction things are supposed to go. Now, you're probably already objecting, and you're right to. You're thinking, but that is absurd because the world obviously does not run backward. Eggs break. But I have never once seen a broken egg leap back together and seal itself whole. People grow older, never younger. Smoke spreads out from a fire and fills a room, but it never gathers itself back into a tidy column and dives into the embers. The world has an obvious direction. The future is clearly different from the past. We will deal with exactly this objection later, and the answer is one of the most beautiful and unsettling ideas in all of science. So hold on to your sense that something is wrong here, because you are noticing something real. But notice also what you are not noticing. The direction you see in the world, eggs breaking and smoke spreading, is not the same thing as time flowing. A direction is just a difference between two ends, like the difference between the top and bottom of a hill. A flow is something moving along that direction. You can have a hill with a clear up and a clear down without anything actually rolling down it. And when physicists look closely, they find plenty of evidence for the hill, the direction, but no evidence at all for the rolling, the flow. So here is the picture that physics actually paints, stripped of the story we usually wrap around it. The universe is not a movie being projected onto a screen, one frame replacing the last, the present moment the single illuminated frame moving forward through the reel. The universe, as the equations describe it, is more like the entire reel of film itself, laid out all at once, every frame already present, every moment that has ever happened or will ever happen, sitting there in the structure, complete. There is no projector lamp moving down the strip, lighting up one frame as the reel now while the others wait in darkness. From the point of view of the mathematics, every frame is equally lit. Every moment simply is. Stay with the film reel for a moment, because it carries the whole idea in a single image, and we will lean on it more than once tonight. When you watch a movie in a theatre, you experience a story unfolding, one moment giving way to the next, tension building toward a resolution that has not arrived yet. But the film itself, the physical strip of it, does not unfold. It is all there at once, every frame already printed, the ending sitting on the reel right next to the beginning, the hero already saved and already in danger and already born and already gone, all of it coiled up together in the canister. The unfolding is not in the film. The unfolding is in the projection, in the lamp moving down the strip one frame at a time, lighting each in turn. Take away the projector and you do not lose the story. The story is still all there, printed in full. You only lose the experience of it arriving piece by piece. What relativity suggests, and what we're going to follow all the way to its end, is that the universe is the film and not the projection. Every frame is printed, and the lamp that you feel moving down the strip, the bright travelling now that seems to be turning the unlit future into the lit present, may not exist at all out there in the world. It may be something happening only in here, in the one watcher who is somehow convinced the movie is playing. There is something almost vertiginous about trying to hold that thought steady, because the mind keeps trying to ask when all the frames exist, as if there were some larger time in which the whole reel sits waiting. But that question has no answer, and noticing why is your first real step off the familiar ground. There is no larger time. The block is not sitting frozen at some particular moment, the way an ice cube sits frozen in your freezer through the afternoon. It is not frozen in time. It contains all of time, and there is no outside clock against which it could be said to be holding still or moving. It simply is, in a sense of the word is that has no tense, that is neither was nor will be, a sense we almost never use because our entire language was built by creatures who feel the lamp moving and cannot help speaking as though it were real. I know how that sounds. It sounds like a philosopher's word game, the kind of thing that has no consequences for real life. So let me be very clear about what I am claiming, because this is not philosophy. This is the straightforward reading of the most successful, most precisely tested physical theory ever created. The theory that runs the satellite network you use to find your way to a friend's house. The theory that has never once failed an experiment in over 100 years. That theory is Einstein's relativity, and relativity does not merely fail to mention the flow of time, it goes further. It actively tells you that the present moment, the universal now you feel so sure of, cannot exist, because it would have to mean different things to different people, and there is no way for the universe to choose between them. That is the thread we pull next, and it begins with a young man, a thought experiment about trains and lightning, and a conclusion so quietly devastating that we're still arguing about what it means more than a century later. Before we get there, sit for a moment with where we already are. The flow of time has no speed you can measure. The laws of physics contain no present moment and no preferred direction. The universe, as far as the mathematics is concerned, may be a finished structure rather than an unfolding story. Each of these is a small crack on its own. But they all point the same way, toward the same enormous and frightening possibility, the one this whole night is circling. And the strangest part is not that physicists discovered this recently after some exotic new experiment. The strangest part is that it has been sitting quietly inside our best theories for over 100 years, hidden in plain sight, while all of us, physicists included, went on feeling the river move. Why we feel it move when the physics says it does not, that is a mystery we will come to. But first we have to take away the one thing you are most sure of. We have to take away now. Part 3. The Day 19. 05 took away now. In 1905, a 26-year-old man who could not get a university job was working as a clerk in a patent office in Bern, Switzerland, evaluating applications for electrical devices. In his spare hours, he was quietly dismantling the foundations of physics. His name was Albert Einstein, and the theory he published that year, special relativity, rested on just two simple-sounding ideas. The first was that the laws of physics should look the same for anyone moving at a steady speed, whether you're sitting still in a room or gliding along in a smooth train. There is no experiment you could do inside a sealed, smoothly moving cabin that would tell you whether you were moving or at rest. The second idea was stranger, and it was forced on him by the behaviour of light. The speed of light, he proposed, is the same for everyone, no matter how they are moving. That number, about 299,792 kilometres every second, is fast enough to circle the entire Earth roughly 7.5 times in the time it takes you to say the word now. And crucially, you measure that same speed whether you're racing toward the light or away from it. That second idea sounds harmless until you chase it. We're used to speeds adding up. If you throw a ball forward from a moving train, someone on the ground sees the ball moving at the speed you threw it plus the speed of the train. But light refuses to play by that rule. Shine a beam forward from a speeding train, and a person on the ground does not measure the light going faster than usual. They measure exactly the same speed you do, that same 299,792 kilometers per second. Light does not care how fast its source is moving, and once you insist on that, something has to give, because speed is just distance divided by time. If everyone agrees on the speed of light but they are moving differently, then they cannot all agree on distance and time. Space and time themselves have to bend to keep the speed of light constant. And the first casualty of that bending is the idea that everyone shares the same now. Einstein showed this with a thought experiment about a train and 2 bolts of lightning. Imagine a long train moving down a track, and imagine lightning strikes both ends of the train at what appears to be the same instant. A person standing on the ground exactly halfway between the 2 strikes sees the 2 flashes arrive at the same moment, and concludes, sensibly, that the strikes were simultaneous. They happened at the same time. But now consider a passenger sitting in the exact middle of the train, moving forward as the strikes occur. Because the train is moving toward the front flash and away from the rear flash, the light from the front reaches the passenger a little sooner than the light from the back. The passenger, who is just as entitled to trust their own eyes, concludes that the front strike happened first. The 2 strikes were not simultaneous at all. Here is the part that matters, the part that took 100 years to fully sink in. Neither of them is wrong. There is no experiment that can settle the argument, no referee standing outside the universe who can declare which one really got it right. Relativity says, flatly, that there is no preferred point of view, no master clock. The person on the ground is correct that the strikes were simultaneous in their frame. The passenger is correct that they were not simultaneous in theirs. Simultaneity, the very idea of 2 things happening at the same time, turns out not to be a fact about the universe. It is a fact about your motion. Change how you are moving, and you change what counts as happening now somewhere else. Let that settle, because it is the hinge on which everything turns. Your now and my now are not the same now. If you and I are moving relative to each other, even slightly, then your slice of what is happening right now across the universe is tilted compared to mine. We will disagree about whether 2 distant events are simultaneous, and neither of us can be corrected, because the universe does not keep a single master list of what is happening now. The faster and the farther apart things are, the more our nows diverge. The amount of the disagreement follows a simple shape. It grows with how fast you're moving relative to each other, and it grows with how far away the distant event is. Multiply a small velocity by an enormous distance, and you can turn an unmeasurable sliver of disagreement into days, or years, or centuries. That single fact, that distance amplifies the disagreement without limit, is the lever that pries the whole familiar picture apart, and we are about to push on it hard. I want to be careful that this does not sound like a trick of the eyes, like the simple fact that distant things look delayed to us because their light takes time to arrive. That delay is real, but it is not what this is about, and it is important to keep them separate. The relativity of simultaneity is not about when the light from an event reaches you. Physicists already subtract out the travel time of light. They are asking, after accounting for how long the signal took to arrive, when the event actually happened. And even after that careful subtraction, two observers moving differently still disagree, not about when they saw the event, but about when it occurred. The disagreement is not in the seeing, it is in the structure of time itself. There is no master list, no cosmic ledger that records the one true moment at which a distant thing happened, because the universe does not keep such a ledger. Each observer builds their own, and the ledgers do not match, and none of them is the original. For two people in the same room, walking past each other, the disagreement is so tiny it could never be measured, a matter of unimaginably small fractions of a second. But the disagreement does not stay tiny when you look far enough away. Across cosmic distances, a footstep can move your now by days. We will see exactly that in a moment, and it is the most vertiginous idea you will hear tonight. Einstein himself understood where this led, and he said so in words that have haunted physics ever since. Near the end of his life, when his lifelong friend Michel Besso died, Einstein wrote a letter of consolation to Besso's family. In it he wrote that people like himself, who believe in physics, know that the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Sit with that phrase, because we are going to return to it at the very end of this journey, and it will mean something different to you then than it does now. A stubbornly persistent illusion. Not a mistake you can simply correct and move past, but an illusion that persists, that clings, that refuses to let go even when you understand it. Einstein wrote those words in March of 1955. He died about a month later. The man who took the present moment away from the universe spent the last weeks of his own life insisting that the difference between is, was, and will be is something the universe does not actually contain. It would be easy to wave all this away as abstract cleverness, the kind of thing that might be true in equations but could not possibly matter for the solid world we live in. So I want to ground it in something hard before we go on. This is not a guess. The relativity of simultaneity comes packaged with time dilation, the slowing of moving clocks, and that slowing has been measured over and over with a precision that leaves no room for doubt. In 1971, two scientists named Haffel and Keating took atomic clocks, the most accurate clocks ever built, and flew them around the world on ordinary commercial airplanes, then compared them to identical clocks that had stayed on the ground. The flying clocks disagreed with the ground clocks by tens to hundreds of billionths of a second, exactly as relativity predicted. The clocks that moved had genuinely experienced less time. This is not theory. This is luggage on a passenger jet. And the airplane clocks are only the friendliest of a long line of confirmations. High in the atmosphere, when cosmic rays slam into the air, they create tiny particles called muons, which are unstable and fall apart, on average, in about 2/millionths of a second. At the speed they are travelling, that lifetime should let them fall only a few hundred meters before they decay, nowhere near enough to reach the ground. And yet detectors at sea level catch them in large numbers, far more than should survive the trip. The reason is exactly the slowing of time. From our point of view on the ground, the muons are moving so fast that their internal clocks run slow, stretching their brief lives just enough to complete the journey. From the muon's own point of view, its life is as short as ever, but the distance to the ground is contracted, shrunk, so that it has less far to fall. Both stories are true, and they only agree, only add up to the same muons arriving at the same detectors inside the four-dimensional block where space and time trade off against each other exactly as Minkowski drew it. Earlier still, in 1938, an experiment by two physicists named Ives and Stilwell measured the slowing of time directly in the laboratory by watching the light from fast-moving atoms shift in a way that only made sense if the atoms' own clocks were running slow. The young clerk's strange conclusions have been checked from every direction we can devise, in the sky and on the bench and in the satellites, for the better part of a century, and they have never once failed. And every time you use your phone to find your way somewhere, you're trusting this same physics, in a way we're about to see is almost unbelievable. The young clerk in the patent office was right. There is no universal now, and if there is no universal now, then the line you have drawn between the settled past and the open future has just lost its footing, because that line was always supposed to be where now is, and now turns out to be a different place for everyone. Part 4. Two Strangers. On a sidewalk. I want to take you somewhere very ordinary now, because the strangest consequence of everything we have just covered does not happen in a laboratory or aboard a spacecraft. It happens on a sidewalk between two people who will never know what they did to the universe simply by walking. This thought experiment was made famous by the mathematician and physicist Roger Penrose, and it is usually called the Andromeda paradox. I am going to slow all the way down here because I want you to feel it, not just understand it. Picture a quiet street in the evening. The light is low and golden. Two people are about to pass each other on the pavement, close enough to nod. One of them is walking north, let us say, in the direction that happens to point toward the Andromeda galaxy, the great spiral of 1 trillion stars that floats about 2.5 million light-years from Earth, the nearest large galaxy to our own. The other person is walking south, in the opposite direction, away from Andromeda. They are not running. They are strolling, a few kilometers per hour, the speed of any evening walk. As they draw level with each other, for one instant, they are standing in almost exactly the same spot. And in that instant, something happens that should not be possible. They're two versions of what is happening right now, this very moment, across 2.5 million light-years of space in the Andromeda galaxy, do not match. They disagree. And they disagree by days. Stay with me inside this. Remember what we just learned. Your slice of now tilts depending on how you're moving, and the tilt grows with distance. Walking speed is laughably slow compared to light, so the tilt is unimaginably gentle. But Andromeda is so far away that even an unimaginably gentle tilt, stretched across 2.5 million light-years, opens into a gap of several days. For the person walking toward Andromeda, the now that they carry, extended out to that distant galaxy, includes events that the other person's now has not reached yet. If, in some Andromedan civilization, a great fleet of ships were preparing to launch, then for the person walking toward the galaxy, the fleet has already launched. The decision is made, it is in their past, settled and done. And for the person walking the other way, standing in the same spot at the same instant, the fleet has not launched. The decision has not yet been taken. It is still in the future, still open, still unmade. Feel the vertigo of that. These two people are standing shoulder to shoulder. They could reach out and touch each other. By every ordinary measure, they are in the same place at the same time, and yet the universe offers them two different answers to the question of whether an event 2.5 million light-years away has happened or not. Not because anyone is mistaken, not because the information has not arrived yet, though of course it has not, and will not for 2.5 million years. The point is far stranger than a delay in the mail. The point is that there is no single truth about whether the fleet has launched. The two pedestrians each carry an equally valid now, and their nows simply disagree, and the universe does not break the tie, because there is no tie to break. There is no fact of the matter about what is happening now in Andromeda. The question has no single answer. Slow the whole scene down to the single instant of passing, and let it become almost dreamlike, because this is the moment I most want you to feel, rather than merely follow. The two of them draw level under the low golden light. One of them is thinking about dinner. The other is half listening to something far away. Neither of them feels anything change. There is no flicker, no chill, no sense that the universe has just split into two incompatible accounts of itself across an unthinkable gulf of space. And yet it has. In the one who is walking toward the great spiral, the now they carry has swept forward across 2.5 million light-years and arrived at an Andromeda, where the fleet has already lifted from its worlds, engines lit, committed, a decision that is now part of the settled and finished past. In the one walking the other way, that same instant reaches an Andromeda where the ships still sit on the ground, the council still arguing, the launch still an open question that might go either way. Same street, same heartbeat, two universes worth of difference at the far end of the line, decided by nothing more than the direction of an evening stroll. And then they pass, and the moment is over, and neither of them will ever know that for one shared instant they stood at the centre of a disagreement the size of the sky. The reason I am dwelling here is that the Andromeda paradox does something the train thought experiment only hinted at. It shows that the disagreement is not some abstract technicality reserved for spaceships near the speed of light. It is built into a walk to the corner. The speeds involved are absurdly ordinary, the speed of any person on any sidewalk anywhere. The only exotic ingredient is the distance, and the universe supplies distances like that for free, in every direction, all the time. Which means the strangeness is not far away in some laboratory. It is woven into the most mundane motion you can imagine. Every time you stand up and cross a room, you're tilting your own slice of now across the entire universe, sweeping it forward in the direction you face and backward behind you, redrawing, by a hair, what counts as already real in galaxies you will never see. You do it constantly. You're doing it now. The question is only what that implies about everything your slice sweeps across. Now ask yourself the question that Penrose wanted you to ask. If the launch of that fleet is, for one of these two people, already a settled fact of the past, then it must be real. You cannot have something be a definite, finished part of your past and also be genuinely undecided and open. And if it is real for the person walking one way, it is hard to see how it could be unreal for the person walking the other way, since they are standing in the same spot and neither has a better claim on the truth. The only way out, the only picture that makes both of them right, is the picture we have been circling all night. The launch of that fleet is simply real, full stop, sitting there in the structure of the universe, neither past nor future in any absolute sense, just there, at its own location, like a city on a map that exists whether or not you have travelled to it yet. The two walkers are not disagreeing about what is real. They are disagreeing about how to slice up a reality that is already complete. They are taking two different cuts through a structure that contains the fleet's launch as a permanent feature. The way two people slicing a loaf of bread at different angles will disagree about which crumbs fall in the same slice, even though the whole loaf is sitting right there on the table, every crumb already in place. That image of the loaf is not mine, and it is not a casual one. It is the picture that one of Einstein's own teachers built out of the mathematics, and it is where we are going next. Because once you accept that distant events are simply real regardless of when you say they happen, you are forced toward a single conclusion about the whole universe and the whole of time. You are forced to see existence not as a story being told, one word at a time, but as a book that is already finished, every page already written, including the pages you have not yet turned to, including tomorrow, including the last page of your own story. We have taken away the universal now. We have seen that distant events are real no matter whose now you trust. Now we have to look at the shape that all of those real events make when you put them together, and it is a shape that will not let you go once you have seen it. Part 5. The shape of everything at once. 3 years after Einstein published Special Relativity, a mathematician named Hermann Minkowski, who had once taught Einstein and had famously thought of him as a lazy student, took the young man's theory and gave it a shape. Minkowski realized that all the strange disagreements between moving observers, all the bending of space and the stretching of time, became simple and clean if you stopped thinking of space and time as two separate things. Space is the 3 dimensions you move through, left and right, forward and back, up and down. Time is the 1 dimension you seem to be carried along. Minkowski's insight was to fuse them into a single 4-dimensional arena, which we now call space-time, and in 1908 he announced it with one of the most quoted sentences in the history of physics. He said that henceforth space by itself, and time by itself, are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a union of the two will preserve an independent reality. Think carefully about what he was saying. He was not saying that space and time are similar or that they are connected, the way we might loosely say that time is a fourth dimension in a science fiction story. He was saying something precise and total. He was saying that the only thing that is truly real, the only thing all observers can agree on, is the four-dimensional whole. Space alone and time alone are shadows, projections, the way a single photograph is a flat shadow of a three-dimensional scene. Different observers, moving differently, slice the four-dimensional whole into space and time in different ways, just as you could slice a loaf of bread along different angles. Their slices disagree, but the loaf, the four-dimensional space-time itself, is one single object that everyone shares, and that object contains all of time at once. This is the block universe. The name comes from exactly the picture you should now be forming, a single solid block, four-dimensional, containing every event that has ever happened or will ever happen, all of it laid out together, complete and unchanging. Your birth is a location in this block. This moment, you listening to these words, is another location, a little further along the time direction. The day you die is a location too, already there, already real, sitting in the block at its own coordinates just as surely as a distant city sits at its own coordinates on a map, whether or not you have driven there. Nothing in the block comes into being. Nothing passes away. The block does not change, because change would require some outside time in which the change could happen, and the block already contains all the time there is. There is no time outside of time. The universe in this picture does not happen. It simply is. Within this four-dimensional structure, each event sits at the tip of two cones of possibility, and physicists really do call them light cones. Reaching forward from any event is the cone of its future, the set of all places and moments that light, or anything slower than light, could reach starting from that event. Reaching backward is the cone of its past, all the events that could have sent a signal to it. These cones are the skeleton of cause and effect. Whatever lies inside your past cone could have influenced you. Whatever lies inside your future cone, you could still influence. But there is a third region, and it is the strangest of all. Everything that lies outside both cones, neither in your past nor your future, is called, plainly, the elsewhere. The elsewhere is the set of events so far away that not even light has had time to connect you to them, and it is precisely for those elsewhere events that the question of now has no answer. The Andromeda Fleet sits in your elsewhere. Whether you call it past or future depends entirely on how you are moving, and the universe shrugs, because in the block it is simply there, a fixed feature of the elsewhere, waiting at its coordinates for no one, because waiting is a thing that only makes sense if time flows, and here it does not. These light cones are not a decoration on the theory. They are the part of it that keeps cause and effect intact, and noticing that should reassure you before we go any further into the strangeness, because it tells you that the block universe is not a lawless place where anything can reach back and rewrite anything. The structure has a grain to it. Nothing inside the block can influence anything outside its own future cone, because to do so would mean sending an effect faster than light, and the cones are precisely the boundary that light sets. So even though every event is equally real, every event is not equally connected. Your past cone is the total set of everything that could have shaped you, every photon and particle and influence that had time to reach you. Your future cone is the total set of everything you might still touch, and the elsewhere, that enormous region beyond both, is the part of reality you can neither affect nor be affected by, the part whose when is up for grabs precisely because no signal can pin it down. Causality survives. The order of cause and effect of you dropping the glass and then the glass breaking is preserved inside every cone, the same for every observer. What does not survive is the idea that there is a single universal now slicing cleanly across the whole of it. Let me make the reality of all this as concrete as I can, because I do not want you to drift into thinking the four-dimensional block is a poetic flourish. Consider the satellites of the navigation system circling overhead right now, more than 20,000 kilometers up, each carrying an atomic clock. Those clocks run at a different rate than the clocks on the ground, for two reasons that pull in opposite directions. Because the satellites are moving fast, their clocks tick a little slow. Because they are higher up, farther from Earth's gravity, their clocks tick a little fast. The gravity effect wins, and the net result is that each satellite clock gains about 38 millionths of a second every single day relative to yours. That number sounds trivial until you remember that these satellites locate you by timing their signals to within billionths of a second. Light crosses about 30 centimeters in a billionth of a second, so an error of 38 millionths of a second a day, left uncorrected, would throw your position off by something like 10 kilometers within a single day, and the errors would only pile up from there. The system would be worthless almost immediately. The only reason the little arrow on your screen knows which street you're on is that the engineers who built it took Minkowski's four-dimensional space-time, with its bending of time and its absence of a universal now, and wired it directly into the hardware. The block universe is not a theory waiting to be tested. It is infrastructure. It is in your pocket. I keep returning to that ordinary little device in your hand because it is the perfect answer to anyone who wants to wave all of this away as clever nonsense. The picture we are building, the frozen four-dimensional structure with no universal now and no flow, is not the speculative part. It is the conservative part. It is what you get if you simply believe the theory that runs the satellites, the theory that has passed every test for over 100 years, and refuse to add anything to it that the experiments do not require. The speculation, the leap of faith, would be to insist that on top of all this confirmed physics, there must also be a cosmic present moment and a real flow of time, even though no experiment has ever detected either one. The strange picture is the careful one. The familiar picture, the moving now you have trusted your whole life, is the one with no evidence behind it. And that reversal, where the everyday belief becomes the wild claim, and the dizzying idea becomes the sober reading, is the quiet shock at the centre of this entire subject. I want to be honest with you about how secure this picture is, because it would be a kind of cheating to make it sound more certain than it is, and it would also be a kind of cheating to make it sound less. The block universe is not a wild speculation tacked onto physics. It is the most natural reading of relativity, the picture you arrive at if you simply take the theory at its word and refuse to smuggle in a master clock that the theory says does not exist. The mathematics of Minkowski's space-time is taught to every physics student in the world. The experiments that confirm relativity confirm the geometry that the block is built from. When your phone finds your location using the satellite network overhead, it is solving equations in Minkowski's four-dimensional space-time, and it is doing so with such precision that the engineers who built that system had to account for the fact that the clocks on the satellites tick at a different rate than the clocks on the ground. Those satellite clocks run fast compared to yours by about 38 millionths of a second every single day. That sounds like nothing, but light travels about 300 meters in a millionth of a second, so if the system ignored that tiny drift, your position would smear out by roughly 10 kilometers every day. The navigation would be useless within minutes. The only reason it works, the only reason the little arrow knows where you are, is that we built the relativity of time directly into the machine. You trust the block universe with your sense of direction every day of your life. You simply never knew its name. So we've arrived at the shape. The universe is a finished four-dimensional structure. Every moment is a location within it. Nothing flows because there is nowhere for the flow to happen, and no second time to clock it against. And here is where the warmth of all this clean geometry suddenly turns cold, because the structure contains your future. Not a prediction of your future, not a likely version of it. The actual future, as real and as fixed as your past, sitting in the block at coordinates you have not yet reached, because reaching, like waiting, is a word that only means something if there is a flow, and there is no flow. You have always thought of the future as the part that has not been written. We are about to look directly at the possibility that it was written all along, and that you have spent your entire life feeling your way toward a destination that was already there before you took a single step. Part 6. Your tomorrow is already standing there. Two philosophers, working independently in the 1960s, took the logic we have been building and stated its conclusion without flinching. Their names were C.W. Reitdike and Hilary Putnam, and the argument they made is so simple that once you see it, you cannot quite believe it took until the 1960s for anyone to write it down plainly, except that it is the kind of conclusion the mind keeps flinching away from. The argument goes like this. We have seen that what counts as happening now, far away, depends on your motion, and that no observer's now is more correct than any other's. We have seen, through the two walkers on the sidewalk, that an event in the elsewhere can be in one person's settled past while it is still in another person's open future, with both people equally right. But if an event is real and settled for even one valid observer, then it must simply be real. Reality is not something an event can have for one person and lack for another while both are correct. And so, the argument concludes, events we call future are exactly as real as events we call past. The future already exists. Your tomorrow is already standing there in the block, finished, waiting in a way that is not really waiting at all. I need you to understand that this is not a fringe position or a philosopher's provocation. It is the conclusion that the cleanest reading of our best-tested theory forces upon you. You can resist it, and serious people do, and we will look honestly at their resistance later tonight. But you cannot resist it for free. To deny that the future is already real, you have to reintroduce a universal now, a master clock, a preferred slice of the universe that says this is the present. Everything before it is real, everything after it is not yet. And relativity, confirmed in luggage on airplanes and in the satellites over your head, says there is no such slice. So you are caught. Either there is a cosmic now that physics has somehow completely failed to find for over a century, or your future is already out there, as solid as yesterday. Let me take you inside the block for a moment, because I do not want this to stay an argument on a page. I want you to walk it. Imagine the four-dimensional universe as an enormous loaf of bread, longer than you can see in either direction, and imagine that you could somehow step outside of time and walk along its length, each slice a single moment of all of existence. You walk past the slice that holds this morning, your coffee cooling, the light coming through the window. You walk past the slice that holds your 10th birthday, the candles, a face leaning down toward yours that you have not thought about in years, all of it still there. Not a memory, not a recording, but the actual moment, sitting in the loaf exactly as real as the slice you think you're living in. You keep walking, and somewhere along the loaf, at coordinates you cannot read from where you stand, there is a slice that holds your last day. It is already there. It does not become real when you arrive. It was never not there. The block does not contain a version of you that is alive and racing toward a death that has not happened. It contains your whole life, from the first slice to the last, laid out at once, every moment of it equally present, none of it gone, none of it waiting, all of it simply, permanently, there. Keep walking the length of the loaf with me, because the strangeness only opens further the longer you stay inside it. Notice that as you walk past each slice, there is a version of you inside it, and every one of those versions is just as convinced as you are right now that its slice is the real present, the live one, the only one that is actually happening. The you at the breakfast table this morning felt that morning as the vivid now. The you at the 10th birthday felt those candles as the only real moment, with the morning still impossibly far in the future. The you at the last slice, whenever and wherever it sits, feels that moment as its living present too. None of them is right that theirs is special, and none of them is wrong, because they are all equally there, each one lit from the inside by its own certainty. There is no single travelling spotlight picking out one of them as the true now while the others wait in the dark. They are all lit at once. You're not a single point moving along the loaf. You're the whole figure carved into its length, every age of you present together, and the feeling each version has of being the one real moment is the same feeling, repeated at every coordinate, like a word written identically on every page of a book. And now let the weight of it settle, slowly, the way it tends to arrive in the quiet hours rather than all at once. Somewhere along that loaf is the slice that holds the worst thing you're afraid of, and it is already there, already real, and you have never once been moving toward it, because there is no moving, but somewhere along that same loaf, just as fixed, just as permanent, is every hour you would give anything to keep. The person whose voice you're afraid of forgetting is still speaking, at their coordinate, the actual sound of them, not a memory of it, the real moment, intact. The afternoon of light that you only recognized as precious once you thought it was behind you is not behind you. It is beside you, in the structure, exactly as real as this one, untouched by the river you imagined was carrying it off. We are so practiced at feeling the cruelty of the fixed future that we have almost no practice at all in feeling the mercy of the fixed past. But they are the same fact. If your death is already real and permanent, then so is every good thing you have ever lived, and nothing in a universe that does not flow is ever actually swept away. Hold that, because the fear comes first and it comes loud, and we have to live inside the fear for a while before its quieter twin will let itself be heard. This is the idea that earns this video its title, and I am going to name the feeling plainly, because you are probably already feeling it. Time is a trap. That is the thought that rises up when this first lands. If the future already exists, if the day of your death is already a fixed location in the structure of reality, then you're not free, you're not moving, you're caught in a corridor whose walls were built before you were born, walking toward an end that was always there, unable to change a single thing, because there is nothing to change, the whole structure is already complete. Time is a trap. Hold that phrase. We're going to return to it near the end, and when we do, I am going to try to show you that the trap is stranger than it first appears, that it is not quite the prison it seems, that the same fact that feels like a cage might also be the only thing that keeps anything safe. But I am not going to rush you past the fear to get there, because the fear is real, and it deserves to be felt, so feel it. Here is the part that is the hardest to hold, and I'm going to say it slowly. Your death is not, in this picture, a thing that is going to happen. It is a place. It already exists, out there in the block, a real moment with a real you in it, and you have never for one instant been moving toward it, because there is no movement. You were always already there, at that coordinate, just as you were always already here, at this one, and always already at your 10th birthday, at all of them at once, your whole self spread out along the loaf like a long figure carved into the length of the bread. And the same is true, and this is the part I want you to catch before we go on, of every moment you have ever loved. The afternoon that you would give anything to return to, the voice you will never hear again, the version of someone before things changed. Those are not gone. In the block, gone is not a thing that happens, because nothing is ever removed from the structure. Those moments are still there, at their coordinates, as real as this one. Loss in a block universe is not the destruction of a moment. It is just the fact that you cannot walk back along the loaf. The moment is intact. You simply cannot reach it from here. Whether that is the cruelest idea in physics or the most merciful is a question we are going to sit with for the rest of this journey, and I genuinely do not think there is a single right answer. But before we can weigh it, we have to face the obvious objection, the one you have been holding since part 2, the one that feels like it should demolish this whole frozen picture in a single blow. Because time obviously does go somewhere, eggs break, we get older. The past is different from the future in a way you can see with your own eyes. If nothing flows, if the block just sits there, then why, in the name of everything, does it feel so completely like it moves? Part 7. But the eggs still break. You have been patient, and now I owe you the objection, because it is a good one, maybe the best one. The world has a direction. You do not need a physics degree to see it. Drop a glass and it shatters, and no amount of weighting will make the shards leap back together into a glass. Stir cream into coffee and it swirls out into a pale brown, and it never once gathers itself back into a tidy white spiral. You remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. You are young and you are older, and you will never be younger again. Everywhere you look, the past and the future are different, and the difference points the same way, like a million tiny arrows all aimed from what was toward what will be. If the universe is just a frozen block, if nothing flows, then where does this overwhelming sense of direction come from? Surely the arrow is proof that time moves. It is not. And the reason it is not is one of the most elegant ideas in all of science, worked out by an Austrian physicist named Ludwig Boltzmann in the 1800s. An idea so far ahead of its time that Boltzmann was mocked for it, and died never knowing he had been right. The answer is a single word: entropy, and entropy is not about time flowing, it is about counting. Let me show you, because once you see it, you can never unsee the difference between a direction and a flow. Think about that glass shattering. There is exactly one way, more or less, for all those atoms to be arranged as a whole, intact glass sitting on a table. But there are an astronomical number of ways for those same atoms to be arranged as a scatter of broken shards across the floor. Whole is rare, broken is common, not because of some law that forbids the glass from reassembling, but simply because there are so many more ways to be broken than to be whole that, if the atoms are jostling around at random, they will almost certainly end up in one of the overwhelmingly more numerous broken arrangements. Entropy is just a measure of how many arrangements look the same from the outside. Low entropy means few arrangements, special and ordered, like the intact glass. High entropy means countless arrangements, disordered and ordinary, like the shards. Boltzmann captured this in a formula so beautiful it is carved on his gravestone, a simple statement that entropy is proportional to the logarithm of the number of arrangements. And the second law of thermodynamics, the most reliable rule in all of physics, says only this: things tend to move from rare arrangements toward common ones, from order toward disorder, simply because the common ones are so much more numerous. That is the arrow. That is the whole of it. There is a human tragedy folded into this idea, and it is worth a moment, because it tells you how hard-won the insight was. Ludwig Boltzmann spent his life insisting that the world was made of atoms, and that heat and order and the direction of time could all be explained by counting their arrangements, at a time when many of the most powerful scientists in Europe did not even believe atoms were real. He was attacked, dismissed, worn down by the fight. He suffered from periods of terrible depression, and in 1906, on a holiday by the sea, he took his own life, never knowing that within a few years the reality of atoms would be confirmed beyond all doubt, and his way of counting their arrangements would become one of the load-bearing pillars of all of physics. The formula relating entropy to the number of arrangements is carved on his gravestone in Vienna, a single short line of mathematics that turned out to contain the reason eggs break, and the reason we remember the past and not the future. He was right. He simply did not live to be told. I mention this not to darken the night, but because there is something fitting in it, that the man who explained the arrow of time as a matter of what is rare and what is common was himself a rare and fragile arrangement worn down by a world that had not yet caught up to him. Let me push the counting idea a little further, because it answers something you might already be wondering. If high-entropy disordered states are so overwhelmingly more common, why was the universe ever in a low-entropy ordered state to begin with? Why did it start so special? The honest answer is that nobody fully knows, and this is one of the genuine open frontiers of physics. The low-entropy beginning, the past hypothesis, is something we have to assume to explain everything we see. But we do not yet have a settled account of why the beginning was that way. Some physicists suspect it points to physics we do not yet understand about the very origin of the cosmos. What we can say is that without that improbably ordered start, there would be no arrow at all. There would be no difference between past and future, no memory, no growth, no breaking and no building, because there would be no slope for anything to run down. The entire felt directionality of your life, the sense that you came from somewhere and are heading somewhere, is the long downstream consequence of the universe having begun, for reasons we cannot yet name, in a state of staggering and unlikely order. You are, quite literally, made of the difference between the ordered beginning and the disordered end, a temporary eddy of structure spread along the great one-way slope of the block. Now here is the turn, and it is the part that should make the floor shift under you again. Notice that this explanation never once mentioned time flowing. It only mentioned counting, what is rare and what is common. The arrow of time, the direction from past to future, is just the direction in which entropy increases, the direction from the rare ordered glass toward the common scattered shards. But that is a direction baked into the contents of the block, not a current carrying you through it. Think of it like a slope on a frozen landscape. The slope has a clear downhill direction, but the landscape is not moving. The slope is just a feature of how things are arranged across it. The arrow of time is exactly that kind of slope, a lopsidedness in the way matter is arranged from one end of the block to the other, with order at one end and disorder spreading toward the other. You're not being carried down the slope, you're simply spread along it, and the part of you at the ordered end remembers, and the part of you at the disordered end has not been reached, and that lopsidedness is what you feel as the passage of time. The feeling is real, the flow is not. But this raises a question that is, if anything, even more unsettling, because if entropy increases toward the future, then it must have been lower in the past and lower still before that. And if you follow that logic all the way back, you're forced to conclude that the universe began in a state of staggeringly, almost impossibly low entropy. And it did. About 13.8 billion years ago, at the moment we call the Big Bang, the universe was in an extraordinarily ordered low-entropy state, and physicists call the assumption that it started this way the past hypothesis. Everything you experience as the direction of time, every broken glass and every cooling cup of coffee and every memory you hold of a yesterday, traces back to that single fact, that the universe began in a condition of almost unthinkable order and has been spreading toward disorder ever since. The arrow of time is not woven into the laws of physics, which, as we saw, run equally well in both directions. The arrow was imported once at the very beginning as a boundary condition, a special starting state, and everything since has simply been the slow unspooling of that initial order into the countless arrangements of disorder. The direction of time is a fossil of the Big Bang, so we can finally answer the objection cleanly. Yes, the world has a direction. No, that direction is not a flow. The eggs break and the coffee cools and you grow older because the universe began in a rare ordered state and is drifting toward common disordered ones. And that drift defines a one-way slope across the block. But a slope is not a current. Nothing is moving down it. The block still just sits there, frozen, complete, containing the ordered early universe at one end and the disordered late universe at the other, and containing you, spread along the slope between them, feeling the lopsidedness and calling it the flow of time. The arrow is real. It points from your birth toward your death, from the whole glass toward the shards. But it is a feature of the map, not a journey across it, and that leaves us with the deepest puzzle of all, the one that is no longer about physics but about you. If the flow of time is not in the equations and not even in the arrow, then it must be somewhere else. It must be in here, in the one place we have not yet looked. It must be in the mind. And so we have to turn the telescope around and point it at the strangest object in this entire story, the thing that has been insisting on the flow of time this whole time. We have to point it at the listener. At you. Part 8. The mind that builds the current. Everything we have said so far has been about the universe. Now I have to say something about you, because the flow of time, having been chased out of the equations and out of the arrow, has only one place left to hide, and that place is your own experience. You feel time passing. Not as a theory, not as an argument, but as the most immediate fact of being alive. So if the physics says nothing flows, then the feeling of flow must be something your mind is doing, not something the universe is doing. The river, it turns out, may be built inside your own skull, and I want to take you in there and show you the machinery, slowly, because it is genuinely one of the strangest things you will ever consider. The idea that the most vivid feature of your entire life is a construction. Start with a simple question. What is the present moment, the now, the instant you feel yourself to be inside of right now? You would think it is an infinitely thin slice, a knife edge with no width, the boundary between past and future. But that is not what your experience is actually like. Psychologists have a name for the now you actually live in, and they call it the specious present, because it is not a true instant at all. It is a smear, a little window of time roughly a few seconds wide that your brain holds together and presents to you as a single ongoing now. When you hear a melody, you do not experience each note as an isolated instant that vanishes the moment the next arrives. You experience the phrase, several notes held together in a single felt present, the earlier ones still alive in your awareness as the later ones sound. Your now has width, and that width is built, assembled, stitched together by your brain out of inputs that did not even arrive at the same time. Let me slow this all the way down and take you inside a single moment of your own experience, because I think it is the most quietly disturbing thing in this whole journey. Right now, as you perceive this instant, your brain is doing something extraordinary and completely hidden from you. The sound of these words is reaching your ears and being processed at one speed. If you can see anything, that light is being processed at a slightly different speed. Signals from your body, the feeling of wherever you're resting, are arriving and being handled on yet another timeline. None of these arrive in your awareness at the moment they happened. Your brain gathers them, holds them, waits a fraction of a second to collect enough of them, and then assembles them into a single, smooth, unified now and hands it to you, already finished, as though it were happening live. The present you feel yourself to be inside of is not the leading edge of reality. It is a story your brain has just composed about a stretch of time that has, in a small but real sense, already passed. You're not living in the now. You're living in your brain's best reconstruction of a now that is always slightly behind. The current you feel is not the river moving. It is your mind, frame by frame, painting motion onto a row of still images, the way a strip of separate photographs becomes a moving picture when the brain fills in the gaps between them. Let me hold you inside a single one of your own moments and take it apart, gently, because I think this is the most quietly astonishing thing in the whole night, more than the galaxies, more than the loaf, because it is happening to you right now, and you have never once caught it in the act. Pick the instant you are in. It feels seamless, immediate, live, the leading edge of your existence, but peel it open, and there are no clean edges anywhere. The sound of these words is reaching you across a tiny but real delay, while your brain decodes it. If your eyes are open, the light is taking its own slightly different path through different machinery. The feeling of wherever your body is resting is arriving on yet another channel, at yet another speed. Your brain receives this little flurry of mismatched signals, none of them quite synchronized, and it does something almost unbelievable. It waits. It holds the signals for a fraction of a second, gathers enough of them, edits them into agreement, and then presents the finished, smoothed, unified moment to you, as though it were happening live, this instant, with no seams and no delay. The now you are inside of has already been assembled. It is a production, broadcast to an audience of one, and the audience is you. And the broadcast is always running slightly behind the events it depicts, and you have never noticed the lag because you have nothing to compare it against. No direct line to the raw world, only the finished show. And here is the turn that should make the floor shift one more time. If the present you experience is something your brain builds, holds, and hands to you a little after the fact, then the live, immediate knife edge now that you have organized your entire understanding of time around does not exist even in your own head, let alone out in the universe. What you call the present is a construction with width and delay, a little stitched together window your mind maintains, and the sense that this window is rushing forward, that one now is being replaced by the next and swept downstream, is simply what it feels like to be a mind that keeps building a new window while still holding the fading one. There is no current carrying the windows away. There is only the building over and over, each new construction holding the trace of the last, and that holding the trace is the entire sensation of time passing. You're not watching the river. You're the act of repeatedly drawing a river and mistaking the drawing for a thing that flows. And the flow, the sense that one moment gives way to the next and is carried off downstream, comes from the same kind of construction. At every instant, your brain holds a trace of what just happened, the fading after-image of the previous moment, and against that trace the new input feels like a change, a movement, a passing. Memory is what gives you a past to compare against. Anticipation is what gives you a future to lean toward, and the felt motion of time is the relationship between them, the constant sensation of the just was sliding into the is and on toward the about to be. But notice that this entire apparatus is built out of states that, in the block, simply sit there. Each configuration of your brain, at each location along the loaf, contains its memories and its anticipations frozen into it. The version of you at this coordinate holds a memory of the previous coordinate. The version 1 step along holds a memory of this one. String those frozen states together and each one feels, from the inside, like the live present moving forward, because each one contains the record of the one before. Julian Barber, a physicist we will meet properly in a moment, put it about as starkly as it can be put. He suggested that the flow of time is an illusion, produced precisely because some frozen moments contain records, memories, photographs, the strata of the past that make them feel like the outcome of a history. There is no motion through the moments. There is only the stack of them and the fact that each one remembers. If that is right, and I want to be careful and say if, because the relationship between physics and consciousness is the least settled part of this entire story, then the most basic texture of your life is a kind of beautiful misunderstanding. You're not a boat being carried down a river. You're something more like a long series of still figures along the length of the loaf, each one convinced it is the live one, each one holding the memory of the figure just behind it, and the expectation of the figure just ahead, each one feeling the flow that none of them is actually part of. The river was never moving. You were never moving along it. There is only the structure, and inside the structure, at every point, a mind insisting with total sincerity that this, right here, is the moment that is really happening, and that it is sliding forward. The insistence is the illusion Einstein called stubbornly persistent, and it is so persistent because it is not bolted on from outside. It is built into the very way a mind that remembers and anticipates has to experience its own existence. You could understand every word of this, and the river would not stop flowing for you, not for a second, because the flowing is what it feels like to be a remembering thing sitting frozen in the block. Which raises a question that took us from physics into philosophy, and now takes us somewhere even stranger, into a story about a logician, a birthday present, and a proof that may show that time, the real objective passage of it, cannot exist at all. Part 9. The Birthday Gift That Broke Time. In 1949, the great logician Kurt Gödel gave Albert Einstein a present for his 70th birthday. The two men were close friends in their later years at Princeton, often seen walking home together, lost in conversation, two of the most powerful minds of the century keeping each other company. Gödel was already the most famous logician alive, the man who had proven that any system of mathematics powerful enough to be useful must contain true statements it can never prove, a result that had shaken the foundations of mathematics the way relativity had shaken physics. And for Einstein's birthday, Gödel did not give him a book or a bottle of wine. He gave him a new solution to the equations of general relativity, Einstein's own theory of gravity, and that solution was a quiet bomb aimed at the existence of time itself. Here is what Gödel found. Einstein's equations of gravity allow for many possible universes, depending on how you arrange the matter inside them. Gödel asked what would happen in a universe that was gently rotating as a whole, the entire cosmos turning, like a slow carousel of galaxies. And he discovered something that startled even Einstein. In such a rotating universe, the equations permit paths through space-time that curve all the way back to their own starting point, not just in space, but in time. Physicists call these closed time-like curves. A traveller following one would move forward through their own experience the whole way, never reversing, always feeling time pass normally, and yet would eventually arrive back at an earlier moment of their own history, able in principle to meet their younger self. In Gödel's universe, the past is not gone. It is a place you could, with enough energy and a strange enough route, travel back to and visit. It is worth pausing on how carefully Gödel built this, because he was the last person in the world to make a loose argument. This was the man who had taken the dream of a complete and perfect mathematics and shown, with unimpeachable logic, that it could never be finished, that any system complex enough to do arithmetic would always contain truths it could not prove. He did not deal in hand-waving. So when he turned that same relentless precision on Einstein's equations, he was not playing with science fiction. He found an exact, valid solution, a complete mathematical universe that obeyed every rule of general relativity, in which the paths I described genuinely close back on themselves in time. And he understood immediately what it meant, because he had spent his life thinking about exactly this kind of thing, about what follows necessarily from what. If such a universe is even possible within the theory, then the theory by itself does not require time to pass. The passage of time is not a theorem of relativity. It is, at most, an extra assumption we bring to it, and Gödel had just shown that the assumption can be consistently dropped. Einstein, in his published response, admitted that Gödel's solution troubled him, that these closed paths through time raised questions he found deeply uncomfortable and could not fully dismiss. He fell back on the hope that such universes, however mathematically valid, might be ruled out on physical grounds, that the real cosmos simply would not be built that way. And he may well have been right that our universe does not contain these loops. But that was never the point, and Einstein knew it, which is why it troubled him. The point was about what the theory permits, about whether the flow of time is written into the laws or merely into our experience of them. Gödel had demonstrated with the same cold certainty he had once turned on mathematics itself, that it is written into our experience and not into the laws. Two friends near the ends of their lives, and one hands the other a proof that the running out they could both feel in their own bodies is not something the universe is actually doing. Gödel did not present this as a recipe for building a time machine. He was after something philosophical, something far sharper. He reasoned like this. We usually think the past is gone, finished, no longer real, precisely because we cannot get back to it. The pastness of the past seems bound up with its unreachability. But in his rotating universe, the past is reachable. You could return to a moment you had already lived through, and it would be there, real, waiting, exactly as solid as the present. And Gödel argued that this exposes something about the nature of time everywhere, not just in his exotic universe. If, in a perfectly valid solution of Einstein's equations, an objective passage of time is impossible, because every moment remains reachable and therefore real, then the objective passage of time was never a necessary feature of relativity in the first place. It was never built in. And Gödel took the further step of suggesting that this tells us something about our own universe too. The flow of time, he concluded, is not an objective feature of reality, but a feature of our particular perspective within it, an aspect of how we experience the world rather than how the world is. If time can fail to pass in one universe that the equations allow, then its passing in ours cannot be the fundamental truth we took it for. It is contingent, perspectival, a property of observers, not of the cosmos. Now, our universe does not appear to be rotating in the way Gödel's required, and as far as we can tell there are no closed time-like curves running through it that you could ride back to last Tuesday. So Gödel's universe is not a description of where we live. But that was never the point, and it is important not to misunderstand it as a claim about time travel, which is a topic for another night entirely. The point was about possibility and necessity. Gödel had shown that within Einstein's own theory, the theory we trust, there is no requirement that time objectively pass. The flow can be switched off entirely in a consistent universe, and if it can be switched off there, then where we do feel it, here, that feeling cannot be coming from the bare physics, because the bare physics is perfectly happy without it. The feeling must be coming from us. It is the same conclusion we reached by looking inside the brain in the last part, but Gödel arrived at it from the opposite direction, from pure logic and the structure of Einstein's equations, and the fact that two such different roads lead to the same quiet place should make us take that place seriously. The man who had found the limits of mathematics handed his friend for his 70th birthday a proof that the thing they both felt most certainly, the passing of their own remaining years, was not something the universe itself was doing. There is something almost unbearably human about that gift. Two old friends near the ends of their lives, and one of them says to the other, in the language of mathematics, the thing we fear is happening, the running out of our time. Look, the universe does not even contain it. Whether that was meant as a comfort or simply as the truth, Gödel never quite said. But it sets up the last and steepest step of our descent, because so far we have been talking as though time, even if it does not flow, at least exists as a dimension, the length of the loaf, the direction along which everything is laid out. We are now going to look at a strand of modern physics that questions even that. We are going to look at the possibility that time is not just frozen, but that at the most fundamental level of reality, time is not there at all, that it is not a basic ingredient of the universe, but something that emerges second-hand from things that are more basic still. If the block universe took away the flow, what comes next takes away the loaf. Part 10. The Floor Beneath the Floor. When physicists try to combine the two great theories of the 20th century, Einstein's relativity, which governs gravity and the large-scale shape of space-time, and quantum mechanics, which governs the smallest particles, they run into a wall. The two theories do not fit together, and in the most studied attempt to write down a single equation for the quantum state of the entire universe, an equation worked out by John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt in the 1960s, something astonishing happens. The time variable disappears. In ordinary quantum mechanics, there is an equation that tells you how a system changes over time. But when you apply the same logic to the whole universe at once, the term that represents change over time drops out, and you are left with an equation that describes a universe that does not evolve at all. It just is. Physicists call this the problem of time, and it has never been fully solved. The best quantum equation we have for the cosmos as a whole seems to be telling us that, at the most fundamental level, the universe is static, timeless, a single frozen quantum state, not unfolding, not progressing, simply existing, all at once, forever, which is a strange word to use when there is no time for the forever to happen in. This sounds like it cannot possibly be right, because we obviously do experience time. So how do physicists try to rescue the situation? The most elegant proposal came from Don Page and William Wouters in 1983, and it is genuinely beautiful. They suggested that time is not a fundamental backdrop at all, but something that emerges from a relationship, specifically from a kind of quantum connection called entanglement. Imagine the universe split into two parts. A small part you call a clock and everything else. On its own, in the timeless equation, nothing happens. But the clock and the rest of the universe are entangled, their states linked. And if you ask not what is the universe doing over time, but rather what does the rest of the universe look like when the clock reads a particular value, you get back exactly the appearance of change, of evolution, of time passing. Time, in this picture, is not something the universe moves through. It is a way of describing how different parts of a frozen, timeless whole are correlated with one another. Time is what change looks like from the inside. Read off the relationship between a clock and the world, even though the whole structure taken together never changes at all. Experiments in the last decade using entangled photons have even demonstrated this principle in miniature, building tiny systems where an observer inside sees time passing, while an observer looking at the whole thing from outside sees a static, unchanging state. Time emerged, from the inside, out of a timeless whole. It has been done on a laboratory bench. Take a breath with that, because it is one of the most remarkable experimental results almost nobody has heard of. Researchers built a small quantum system, divided it into a part that played the role of a clock and a part that played the role of the rest of the universe, and entangled the two. From the outside, looking at the whole system at once, nothing changed. The total state just sat there, static, timeless, exactly as the universal equation predicts. But from the inside, asking how the rest looks when the clock reads each of its values, a perfectly ordinary story of change and evolution appeared, a little world in which time passed. Both descriptions were true at the same time. The frozen whole and the flowing interior were not in competition. They were the same system seen two ways, and if that can be true of a handful of particles on a bench, the proposal goes, it can be true of everything. The universe entire may be a single timeless quantum state, unchanging and complete, while every observer woven into it, every clock, every mind, experiences from the inside the steady passage of a time that the whole, taken together, does not have. Now, let the size of this settle over you, slowly, the way the cold settles when you have been outside too long without noticing. We have spent this journey taking things away. We took away the flow of time. We took away the universal now. We took away the idea that the arrow was a current rather than a tilt in how things are arranged. We found the flow hiding in your own mind, a thing your brain builds rather than something it detects. And now, at the foundations, we find serious physics suggesting that time is not even a basic ingredient of reality, that the universe at its root does not unfold at all, but simply exists, timeless and entire, and that everything we call time, including the long dimension of the loaf itself, is something that emerges second-hand, the way the temperature of a gas emerges from the motion of atoms that have no temperature of their own. If that is right, then the universe is not a process that is happening. There is no great clock ticking somewhere behind the scenes, keeping the show running, because there is no show and there is no running. There is only the structure, being what it is, with no outside moment in which it could be said to begin, or proceed, or end. And you, who have felt so certain this entire time that your life is something unfolding, are a standing pattern inside that structure, a pattern that happens to hold within itself the records of a yesterday, which is the one and only reason you believe in a flow at all. Existence, at the bottom, may not be an event. It may not be a thing that happens. It may simply be a thing that is. And that is a far stranger and far lonelier thought than any asteroid or dying star, because it is not out there at the edge of the cosmos. It is the ground you are standing on right now, in the dark, listening. Other physicists have pushed even further. Julian Barber, whom we met when we were inside your own mind, has spent his life arguing that time simply does not exist. Full stop. In his picture, reality is not a four-dimensional loaf stretched along a time direction. It is something he calls Platonia, an enormous, timeless collection of every possible instantaneous configuration of the universe, every possible arrangement of everything, all sitting there together with no order, no before and after, no flow connecting them. Each configuration is a complete now, a frozen snapshot of a whole universe. Some of these snapshots happen to contain what look like records, structures that resemble memories, fossils, photographs, the light from distant stars, things that make that snapshot feel like the result of a long history. And a mind inside such a snapshot will inevitably believe it has come from a past and is heading toward a future, because it is built out of the records the snapshot contains. But there is no actual journey from one snapshot to the next. There is only the timeless heap of them. The physicist Carlo Rovelli, coming at it from yet another direction, argues that as you look closer and closer at the foundations of physics, time loses every property we associate with it, one by one, its direction, its single present, its independence, even its continuity, until at the very bottom there is no time at all, only events and the relations between them, and time is something that bubbles up, approximate and blurry, only when you stand back far enough and squint. I want to pause here and let the size of this land, because we have come a very long way from the river you trusted at the start. We began by removing the flow of time, then we removed the universal now, then we removed the idea that the arrow was a current rather than a slope. Then we found the flow hiding inside your own mind, a construction rather than a discovery. And now, at the foundations, we find physicists seriously proposing that time is not even a basic feature of reality, that the universe at its root does not unfold in time at all, but simply exists as a timeless structure or a timeless heap of moments, and that everything we call time, including the loaf itself, is something that emerges second-hand, the way temperature emerges from the jostling of atoms that have no temperature of their own. If they are right, then the universe is not a process that is happening. There is no cosmic clock ticking somewhere, keeping the great show running, because there is no show and there is no running. There is only the structure being what it is. And we are patterns inside that structure, patterns that happen to contain records of a yesterday, which is the only reason we believe in a flow at all. Existence at the bottom may not be an event. It may not be something that happens. It may just be something that is. And you, the one who has felt so certain this whole time that your life is something unfolding, may be a standing pattern in a structure that never moves, holding inside yourself the memory of a past that is not behind you, and the expectation of a future that is not ahead of you, both of them simply elsewhere in a structure that contains them already, complete. That is the floor beneath the floor, and standing on it, the oldest and most personal question of all comes back, sharper than ever. If the universe does not unfold, if it was all already there, then what exactly are we doing when we choose? Part 11. The trap with no current to escape on. We have arrived at the question that has been waiting under everything, the one that makes this subject keep people awake rather than merely impressing them at dinner. If the future already exists fixed and complete in the block, then what happens to choice? When you decide tomorrow whether to make the call, take the job, say the thing you have been afraid to say, are you really deciding anything? Or is the outcome already sitting there in the structure, already real, already finished, with your sense of weighing the options just a feeling that accompanies a result that was never actually up for grabs? This is the place where the cold idea becomes a personal one, where the geometry reaches into your own life and asks whether you have ever, even once, been free. Let me first say plainly what the fear is, because it deserves to be stated at full strength before I complicate it. If your tomorrow is already a fixed location in the block, then it seems that nothing you do can change it, because there is nothing to change. The structure is already complete. The decision you will agonize over is already made, sitting there at its coordinate. Your agonizing is also there, at its own coordinate just before it. And so it can feel as though you're an actor reading lines that were printed before you were born, experiencing the illusion of improvising while the script runs exactly as written. This is the trap, and I named it many parts ago, so let me say it again now that it has its full weight. Time is a trap. Not because something terrible is coming, but because the whole structure is sealed, every moment already in place, and you appear to be locked inside a corridor whose far wall already exists, walking toward an end you cannot alter, because alteration would require a flowing present in which the changing could occur, and there is no flow. Let me take you to the moment where this is felt most sharply, because I do not want it to stay abstract. Picture yourself at a real fork in your life, a genuine decision, one you can imagine clearly. It is night. You're standing at the choosing, and ahead of you the future runs off into the dark like a length of railway track you cannot see the end of. And here is the thought that the block universe puts into your mind as you stand there. The track is already laid. Every rail, every sleeper, all the way to the end, is already there in the darkness, fixed, finished, real, whether or not you can see it. You're not building the track as you go. You're simply about to travel along a route that already exists in full. The decision you're about to make is already a feature of that track, and you feel, standing there, that your choosing cannot matter, because the rail is already where it is, and you're only about to discover which way it bends. But stay in that moment with me, because something is hiding inside it that changes everything, and it is subtle, and it is the most important turn in this whole night. Yes, the track is already laid, but what laid it? In a block universe, the future is fixed, but it is not fixed by something outside of you, reaching in and overriding your will. It is fixed in part by you, by your choosing, which is itself one of the events woven into the structure. Your deliberation, your weighing, the reasons you turn over, the values you act from, these are not bypassed by the block. They are in the block. They are exactly the events that make the track bend the way it bends. The future is not laid down in spite of your choice. Your choice is part of what lays it down. The structure being complete does not mean your choosing is fake. It means your choosing is permanent. You are not overruled. You are written in. This is the position philosophers call compatibilism, the idea that a fixed future and real choice are not enemies, because what makes a choice yours is not that it could have been otherwise in some cosmic dice roll, but that it flows from you, from your reasons and your character, which it does, sitting right there in the block where you put it. Go back to the track in the dark for a moment and feel how the meaning of it changes once you see this. The first time you stood there, the laid rail felt like a sentence, like proof that your choosing was theatre, that the outcome was decided behind your back and you were only going through the motions of deciding. But look again at what the rail is actually made of. It is made of your decision. The reason the track bends the way it bends, the reason it runs toward this future and not some other, is the weighing you're doing right now, in the dark, the values you're acting from, the person you have become. Remove your choosing and you do not get the same rail anyway by some other means. You get a different structure entirely, a different track, a different block. The future is fixed, yes, but you are one of the things fixing it, and that is not a smaller role than the one you imagined you had. It is arguably a larger one, because in the ordinary picture your choices vanish the instant they are made, swept away downstream into a dead past. In the block, your choice is permanent. It does not evaporate. It becomes a load-bearing part of what is forever. You are not overruled by the structure. You are written into it, in your own hand, and I owe it to you to be honest that this compatibilist answer does not satisfy everyone, because there is a version of the worry it does not touch. You might say, but I still could not have done otherwise. The rail was always going to bend exactly this way, so in what sense was it ever open? That is a real question, and philosophers have argued about it for centuries without final agreement, and I am not going to pretend tonight settles it. What I will say is that the openness you are mourning, the cosmic dice roll where things could genuinely have gone another way, may never have existed under any picture of physics, flowing time or frozen, because even a universe with a moving present is still governed by laws that connect each moment to the next. The block does not take away a freedom you would otherwise have had. It only makes vivid a question that was always sitting underneath the comfortable feeling of an open road. And once you stop demanding that your choices be uncaused accidents, and start asking only that they be truly yours, truly flowing from you, then the block gives you everything you actually wanted. It gives you authorship. It just also makes that authorship permanent, which is a heavier and stranger gift than the fleeting kind we thought we had. I want to be fair, though, and tell you that not everyone accepts the block universe, and the people who resist it are not cranks. There are serious thinkers who hold to what is called presentism, the common sense view that only the present moment is truly real, the past gone and the future genuinely not yet existing. It is the most natural belief in the world, the one we all live by. The trouble is that presentism has to answer relativity, and relativity, as we have seen, denies that there is a single present moment for the whole universe to share. To save presentism, you have to propose that there really is a hidden master clock, a true now, a preferred way of slicing the universe that physics simply has not detected, and that all the relativity of simultaneity is a kind of veil over a deeper, absolute time. People have tried to build such theories, and they cannot be ruled out, but they require adding something to physics that no experiment has ever found, and that sits uneasily with everything we have confirmed. There is also a middle position, the growing block, which says the past and present are real but the future is not, that the block grows, adding new slices as time passes, the universe accumulating like a story being written. It is an appealing compromise because it keeps the future open, but it smuggles back in the very thing relativity took away, an objective present moment, the growing edge where the writing is happening, and so it faces the same problem as presentism. The honest situation is this: the block universe is the most natural reading of our best theory, and the alternatives all require paying a price that physics gives us no reason to pay. That does not make the block certainly true. It makes it the position you are forced toward unless you are willing to bet that physics is missing something enormous. And I have to clear away one more thing before we land, because the fixed future gets twisted, online and in the imagination, into something it is not. People hear that the future already exists and leap to the idea that it can therefore be foreseen, that prophecy and premonition must be real, or that effort is pointless because everything is predetermined anyway, so why try? Neither of these follows, and it matters that you see why. The future existing does not make it knowable from where you stand. Nothing in the block lets you read ahead. The information about tomorrow is at tomorrow's coordinate, not available at today's, and no physics gives you a window down the loaf. And as for why try, we just saw the answer. Your trying is one of the things that fixes the future. A fixed future is not a future that happens without you. It is a future that happens through you, with your effort as one of its load-bearing parts. Take away your trying, and you do not get the same outcome by some other route. You get a different structure. The fatalist who says it is all decided, so nothing I do matters, has the logic exactly backward. It is all decided, and what you do is part of how it got decided, which means what you do matters as much as anything in the universe can matter, because it is permanently, unchangeably woven into what is. So here is the real shape of the trap, and it is stranger and gentler than the one we started with. The trap is not that some outside fate is dragging you toward a doom you cannot escape. The trap is quieter than that. There is no current to escape on. There was never a flowing present you could have used to swim against the structure, because the flow itself was never real. You're not being carried toward a fixed end. You're simply, wholly, already there, along your entire length, every moment of your life equally present, including this one, including the choosing, including everything you will ever do. And that, it turns out, is not only the most frightening way to see your life, it may also be, when you turn it over one final time, the most consoling. Part 12. What the river was really doing. So let us go back to the river, the one I asked you to hold on to at the very beginning. You have always assumed that the river of time is moving, carrying you forward, sweeping every moment away behind you into a past that is gone. That is the picture we live by, and it is the source of nearly all our grief about time, the sense that everything is being taken, that every good moment is already receding the instant it arrives, that we are losing our lives even as we live them. But everything we have walked through tonight points to a single, quiet, astonishing correction to that picture. The river was never moving. There is no current. There is no flow. The water you thought was rushing past you and away forever has been perfectly, completely still this entire time. And here is what that changes, the turn I promised you parts ago, the reason I asked you not to look away from the fear too quickly. If the river is not moving, then nothing it carries is being carried off. Nothing is being swept away. Every moment you have ever lived is not gone, because gone requires a flow to carry it away, and there is no flow. The afternoon you loved, the voice you thought you would never hear again, the face leaning down over the birthday candles, the version of someone before everything changed, the ordinary Tuesday you did not know to treasure until it was, you thought, lost. None of it was lost. It is all still there, at its own coordinate, exactly as real as this moment, permanent in the structure, untouched, complete. I think this is why the idea frightens us so much more on the way in than on the way out, and it is worth saying plainly why. We meet the block universe in the direction of our fear. The first thing the mind reaches for is the fixed death, the sealed corridor, the loss of the open road, and all of that is real, and I have not tried to talk you out of it. But the very same structure that fixes the things we dread also fixes the things we love, with exactly equal force, and we are simply far less practiced at noticing the second half, because our whole emotional relationship with time was built around the conviction that everything is being taken. We grieve forward, we brace for loss, we almost never turn around and feel the permanence behind us, because the flowing river picture told us there was nothing back there but a receding emptiness, moment after moment falling away into a past that no longer exists. But if the river is still, then nothing fell away. The past is not an emptiness. It is the most solid thing there is, a structure crowded with every moment that ever happened, none of them gone, all of them held. The same physics that says your worst day is already real says your best one never stopped being real either. You cannot have one without the other. They are the same sentence read in two directions, and there is a quieter consolation folded inside even that, for anyone listening tonight who is carrying a particular loss, a particular person. In the picture our intuition hands us, the people we have lost are simply gone, erased, swept downstream into nothing, and every day carries them further away. In the block, that is not what happened to them. Their life is not deleted. It sits in the structure, whole, every moment of it intact at its own coordinates. The laughter and the ordinary afternoons and the last good day, all of it as real as anything is real, permanently. You cannot walk back along the loaf to reach them, and that unreachability is a genuine grief, and I will not pretend it is not. But unreachable is a very different thing from gone. The light from them is still in the structure of the universe. You're simply standing at a coordinate from which you cannot turn to face it. The river was never carrying them away. There was never a river. There was only the still, complete, unerasable fact of them, which is still there, which will always be there, which nothing can take, because taking requires a flow, and there is none. You cannot walk back along the loaf to reach it. That is the only true loss, the unreachability, not the destruction, because nothing in a block universe is ever destroyed. The cruelest reading of all of this is that your death already exists, fixed and waiting. But sitting right beside that cruelest reading is its twin, which is just as true and which we are far less practiced at feeling. Every moment of your life that was ever good is equally fixed, equally permanent, equally safe from the river you feared was stealing it. In a universe where nothing flows, nothing is ever truly taken from you. It is all still there. You're still there at every moment you have ever been, the whole length of you written permanently into what is. I told you near the beginning that Einstein, in the last weeks of his life, wrote that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. We can hear that phrase differently now, at the end, than we could at the start. He did not write it as a despairing man. He wrote it to console a grieving family, the family of his oldest friend who had just died. And in the context of everything we have seen, it reads less like a denial of loss and more like a strange and difficult kind of comfort. Your friend has not been swept away downstream into nothingness, because there is no downstream and there is no stream. He is still there, at his coordinates, the whole of his life intact in the structure of a universe that does not erase. The illusion is stubborn, and it is persistent, and I do not think understanding any of this will make it loosen its grip on you, not even a little, because the feeling of flow is built into what it is to be a mind that remembers and hopes. You will walk away from this and the river will feel exactly as real and as moving as it ever did. That is fine. That is allowed. The illusion may be the most human thing we have, the thing that lets us love a moment as though it could be lost, which may be the only way a creature like us can learn to love a moment at all. There is a real possibility worth naming here, that the feeling of flowing time, far from being a flaw we would be better off without, is the very thing that makes a life feel like a life. If you truly experienced every moment as eternally present, all at once, with nothing arriving and nothing receding, it is not clear you would experience anything we would recognize as living at all. You would be more like the block itself, complete and motionless, than like a person inside it. The sense of the moment arriving, of having this one chance at it before it seems to slip toward the past, is what gives our choices their weight and our attention, its urgency, and our love its ache. The stubbornly persistent illusion may be the price of admission for caring about anything. A being that felt the truth of the frozen block in its bones, with no felt flow at all, might understand the universe perfectly and never once be moved by it. So perhaps the illusion is not the universe lying to us. Perhaps it is the universe, through us, finding a way to be moved by itself, to have some of its frozen moments matter to the patterns living inside them. The physics takes the flow away. But it may be that the flow was always our contribution, the one thing we add to a structure that, without minds in it, would simply be magnificently and meaninglessly there. But maybe every now and then, in a quiet hour, you will remember what the physics says under the feeling. Maybe when you are afraid of running out of time, you will remember that running out is a story about a flow that is not there. Maybe when you lose something, you will remember that lost is the wrong word for a moment that still exists and simply cannot be revisited. And maybe, when you stand at one of those forks in the dark with the track already laid ahead of you, you will remember that you are the one laying it, that your choosing is not erased by the structure but written permanently into it, that what you do tonight will be, in the most literal sense the universe allows, forever. The block does not take your freedom. It makes everything you do permanent. The block does not steal your happiest moments. It keeps them. Time is a trap, yes, in the sense that there is no exit, no current to ride away on, no way to step outside the structure that holds you. But it is also, seen from the other side, the only thing that guarantees that nothing real is ever finally, completely gone. We have taken away a great deal tonight. We took away the flow and the universal now, and the moving arrow, and even, at the foundations, the loaf itself, the very dimension of time, leaving only a timeless structure and the patterns inside it that dream of a yesterday. It would be easy to feel that we have lost the universe in the process, traded a warm, living, flowing world for a cold and frozen one. But I think it is the opposite. I think what we have found is that nothing is as lost as we feared, that the universe does not erase, that everything that has ever happened is still, in the truest sense physics can offer, there. The question I will leave you with is the one I cannot answer for you, the one each person has to sit with alone in the dark. If every moment of your life already exists and always will, fixed and permanent and beyond the reach of any current, then the only thing left to decide is not whether your moments will last, because they will. The only thing left to decide is what you're going to put in them, here, at this coordinate, the one you happen to be awake inside of right now, knowing that whatever you place here forever. And with that thought, and the river finally still, I will let you rest.